Stop eating sugar for just 14 days, and your body won't feel the same again. The science of what happens next is wilder than most people expect. When you stop eating sugar for 14 days, your body goes through a series of predictable metabolic, neurological, and hormonal changes that reflect how deeply modern diets depend on added sugars. In the first 24 to 48 hours, your blood glucose levels begin to stabilize as the rapid spikes caused by refined sugar disappear. Insulin secretion, which normally surges after sugary meals, starts to normalize, and your body begins relying more on stored glycogen for energy. Many people report headaches and irritability at this stage, which are often symptoms of mild withdrawal as the brain adjusts to lower dopamine stimulation. By day 3 or 4, glycogen stores in the liver and muscles become partially depleted, prompting the body to shift toward fat oxidation for energy. This metabolic transition can feel uncomfortable because glucose is the brain's preferred fuel. As a result, you may experience brain fog, fatigue, and cravings for sweet foods. These cravings are not purely psychological. They are driven by changes in dopamine, signaling pathways in the brain's reward system, particularly in regions like the nucleus accumbens. Studies on sugar consumption suggest that repeated exposure can sensitize these pathways, making sugar reduction feel similar to withdrawal from other rewarding substances. Around the end of the first week, insulin sensitivity often begins to improve noticeably. Without constant sugar intake, cells respond more efficiently to insulin, which helps regulate blood sugar levels more effectively. This improvement is particularly important for individuals at risk of type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome. At the same time, inflammation markers in the body may begin to decrease. High sugar intake is associated with elevated levels of inflammatory cytokines. So, reducing sugar can help calm systemic inflammation, which is linked to joint pain, skin issues, and cardiovascular risk. During this period, changes in gut microbiota also start to emerge. Sugar feeds certain strains of bacteria and yeast in the gut, and when it is removed, the balance of microbial populations shifts. Beneficial bacteria that thrive on fiber and complex carbohydrates may begin to dominate more, improving digestive regularity and potentially enhancing immune function. Some people notice reduced bloating and fewer digestive discomforts during this phase. By the second week, more stable energy levels become noticeable. Instead of the highs and crashes associated with sugar consumption, the body relies more consistently on fat-derived ketones and complex carbohydrates. This metabolic flexibility can improve endurance and mental clarity. The brain adapts to using a more stable fuel source, which can reduce mood swings and irritability that were previously triggered by blood sugar fluctuations. Hormonal changes also continue to unfold. Cortisol levels, which can be influenced by stress and blood sugar instability, may begin to regulate more effectively. Sleep quality often improves as nighttime blood sugar spikes and crashes diminish. People frequently report falling asleep more easily and experiencing deeper rest during the second week of sugar elimination. Taste perception also undergoes noticeable changes. Without constant exposure to intense sweetness, taste buds become more sensitive. Foods that were previously considered bland, such as fruits and vegetables, begin to taste naturally sweeter and more flavorful. This recalibration of taste preference is partly due to changes in receptor sensitivity on the tongue and partly due to neural adaptation in the brain's reward pathways. Physically, some individuals experience mild weight loss during this period, largely due to reduced water retention and lower glycogen storage, as each gram of glycogen binds to water molecules. Additionally, reduced caloric intake from eliminated sugary foods contributes to a mild caloric deficit. However, the more significant changes are metabolic, rather than purely weight-based. Psychologically, the second week often brings improved mood stability. As dopamine signaling becomes less dependent on sugar spikes, baseline mood levels tend to normalize. People may feel less driven by compulsive snacking or emotional eating. This can create a sense of control over food choices that was previously absent. Overall, a 14-day period without sugar does not completely reset the body, but it initiates meaningful physiological changes across multiple systems, including metabolic, neurological, hormonal, and digestive functions. The most important takeaway is that sugar reduction rapidly reveals how adaptable the human body is when given consistent, lower glycemic fuel sources. Extending beyond the basic timeline, it is important to understand what is happening at a biochemical level when added sugar is removed from the diet. One of the most significant early shifts involves hepatic metabolism. The liver is responsible for processing fructose, a major component of table sugar and high fructose corn syrup. When sugar intake is high, the liver converts excess fructose into triglycerides, which can accumulate and contribute to fatty liver disease over time. Within the first 2 weeks of sugar reduction, triglyceride production begins to decline, and some individuals may see improvements in blood lipid profiles. Another key change involves advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These harmful compounds form when sugar molecules bind to proteins or fats in the bloodstream, a process that accelerates aging and contributes to tissue damage. Lower sugar intake reduces the rate of glycation, which may have subtle benefits for skin health and vascular function. Although visible changes are not immediate, the reduction in glycation stress is biologically meaningful over longer periods. On the neurological side, dopamine receptor regulation continues to adjust. Chronic sugar consumption has been shown in animal studies to reduce dopamine receptor sensitivity, meaning more sugar is required to achieve the same reward response. When sugar is removed, receptor sensitivity gradually begins to normalize. This does not happen completely within 2 weeks, but early signs include reduced compulsive cravings and improved ability to experience pleasure from non-sugary rewards, such as social interaction or physical activity. Stress response systems also begin to stabilize. High sugar intake is associated with repeated activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which regulates cortisol production. Frequent blood sugar spikes and crashes can mimic stress signals in the body, leading to fluctuating cortisol levels. As dietary sugar decreases, this artificial stress load is reduced, allowing the endocrine system to operate more consistently. Some people notice reduced anxiety and improved emotional regulation during this phase. Another important physiological adaptation involves mitochondrial efficiency. As the body shifts toward increased fat oxidation, mitochondria become more efficient at producing ATP from fatty acids. This metabolic flexibility is beneficial because it reduces dependence on rapid glucose availability. While this adaptation is more pronounced in longer-term dietary changes, early improvements in energy stability can be observed within the 2-week window. Hydration balance also changes subtly. High sugar intake can lead to increased water retention due to glycogen storage dynamics and insulin-related sodium retention. As sugar intake decreases, insulin levels stabilize, and the kidneys excrete sodium and water more efficiently. This can result in a slight drop in body weight and a feeling of reduced bloating, especially in the abdominal region. From a behavioral perspective, food reward recalibration becomes more evident in the 2nd week. Initially, sugar withdrawal is characterized by strong cravings, driven by habit loops and conditioned responses. These loops involve cues such as time of day, emotional states, or environmental triggers. As the 2-week period progresses, the strength of these conditioned responses weakens. This is partly due to neuroplastic changes in the brain's reward circuitry, where repeated absence of reward reduces cue-induced cravings. Gut hormone regulation also shifts during this period. Hormones such as ghrelin, which stimulates hunger, and leptin, which signals satiety, begin to function more effectively when sugar consumption is reduced. High sugar diets are associated with leptin resistance, which can impair the body's ability to recognize fullness. By reducing sugar intake, leptin signaling may improve, leading to better appetite control. In terms of immune function, reducing sugar intake may lower suppression of white blood cell activity. Some research suggests that high glucose levels can temporarily impair neutrophil function, which is essential for fighting infections. While the immune system is complex and influenced by many factors, lower sugar intake may contribute to a more balanced inflammatory response. Cognitive performance can also experience subtle improvements. After the initial withdrawal phase, many individuals report better concentration and reduced mental fatigue. This is likely due to more stable glucose availability and reduced fluctuations in brain energy supply. The brain functions optimally on a steady fuel source, and reducing sugar helps eliminate the extreme peaks and troughs associated with refined carbohydrate consumption. It is also important to recognize that not all sugars behave identically in the body. Naturally occurring sugars in whole fruits come with fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants that slow absorption and reduce metabolic stress. The changes described in a 14-day sugar reduction primarily relate to added sugars found in processed foods, beverages, and refined snacks. These added sugars are responsible for most of the negative metabolic effects associated with high sugar diets. Psychological identity around food may begin to shift during this time as well. People often begin to reframe their relationship with sweetness, moving from dependency to occasional enjoyment. This cognitive shift is significant because long-term dietary habits are heavily influenced by identity and perception rather than willpower alone. By the end of 14 days, the body is not fully reset, but it has clearly transitioned into a more stable metabolic state. Cravings are typically reduced in intensity, energy levels are more consistent, and several hormonal and inflammatory markers show early signs of improvement. However, continued benefits depend on maintaining these changes beyond the initial period, as metabolic adaptation is an ongoing process rather than a fixed endpoint. Finally, it is important to place the 14-day sugar-free period in a broader context of long-term metabolic health. 2 weeks is sufficient to observe early adaptations in insulin sensitivity, dopamine signaling, and digestive balance, but it is not long enough to fully reverse years of dietary patterns. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe, comment, and share.